What's up, everybody, and welcome to part two of my mini series, just basically talking about my experience with cancer. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Luigi Gonzales, and I'm a first year medical student. But for today's video, I'm basically going to be talking about part two of my journey through cancer. And if you guys haven't tuned in already, I posted part one about a week ago, and in that I talked about my um, like experience right before cancer, how I experienced symptoms and how I ended up being diagnosed with primary mediastinal B cell lymphoma. So for today, we're going to be talking about the treatment that I had to go through, which was called the dose adjusted epoc. So I'll be going over how the treatment works, the medications, basically like my kind of like routine for the treatment, and then the side effects and just basically how my life was like throughout that. So yeah, like let's get right into it. So with regards to my treatment, dose adjusted epoc, I've done some research about it, and basically epoc stands for like each letter basically stands for a specific kind of chemotherapy or a drug that's associated with the chemotherapy. So if we look it up right here, um, we can see that epoc, so the E stands for etoposide, the P is for prednisone, then there's vincristine, which I know stands like is a letter V, but at the same time, like it's okay. Then there's cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin, and rituximab. So those are like kind of the mixture of the chemotherapy. I think cocktail is what they call it when it's like a mix of different drugs. So that's what's kind of like composing the dose adjusted epoc medication that I kept getting. And the dose adjusted part is just because as I go through each session, they're able to increase the dosage up to the point where, like I can say like, I don't think I can handle like an increase, or I think we should just stay at this level because the side effects are getting really bad. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure if it was experimental at the time or if it's like fairly new, but now there's some research articles that are out there and they're dated past like after the date that I was hospitalized at. So, it's kind of cool to see. Um, but yeah, with my like current, first year medical student knowledge right now, I just know that prednisone, um, that's something that I'm familiar with. Vincristine, I know is like it has negative effects on your heart just because of how strong it is. And then there's doxorubicin, which I think is the strongest chemotherapy agent out there. So that's what the chemo that I got is basically compromised of. So with regards to the routine of my treatment, you can basically divide it into kind of 3 week cycles. The first week is I would be receiving the chemotherapy for that whole week, and it would be continuous and nonstop. I basically had what's called a PICC line, which is basically kind of like an IV tubing, but instead of just like going into a blood vessel, it was placed right here on my arm, and the tube went all the way to basically my heart. And like I think that's just a more direct way of putting the chemotherapy out there so that once it enters my heart, it gets pumped into my circulation, just for like a more holistic effect and a faster effect at that. um, but yeah, so for a whole week straight I would be getting the chemotherapy, and then for the next 2 weeks, I'm allowed to go home. In the first couple of, like sessions, it wasn't so bad. Um, the first session for sure, I definitely was just like, oh, why do I have to be in bed for like a whole week? There's times where I'm like, oh, can I please like go walk laps around or like, shoot a basketball or something? Just because I still had the energy, I didn't feel weak at all. But then when I came home from that, that's when I started feeling like when I would be combing my hair, that my hair was starting to fall out and it was getting caught like in my hands. That kind of like really freaked me out because back then, I cared about my hair a lot. Um, but yeah, that was kind of like one of those awakening moments where I'm like, oh man, like this is gonna be serious. Like, yeah, maybe I don't feel too bad right now, but like this is gonna get pretty bad. I remember I still had like the energy to go visit my school, watch my team like when they're practicing and some of their games. Um, but then like after the second session, it started feeling much worse. Um, I think part of the side effects from the prednisone was kind of hitting me really hard. It gave me a lot of like stomach pains. Um, I kind of felt nauseous at times, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I could throw up. I definitely lost appetite, lost my kind of taste, and at the same time, I kept getting mouth like canker sores, especially like around my cheeks, the inside of my cheeks. And then yeah, I would also get like definitely my fingertips. There was a lot of numbness there, and I just felt kind of like a sense of neuropathy throughout my body where there would be like my sense of touch would just be like hyper sensitized, and like a small touch would kind of hurt. Um, but yeah, that started kicking in after the second session, and from then it just got worse. Like the side effects just grew stronger and stronger. Um, One other thing to mention is that as I progressed through each session, especially with the increasing dose, my white blood count decreased over time, and that's I think from the prednisone, just because I think it's an anti-inflammatory, just to kind of prevent my white blood cells from being activated and potentially like fighting off like chemo or whatever they might be like giving to me. Um, so that was a part of the process, and also my red blood count was also decreasing a lot. So with both of those in mind, as I progressed through my treatment, I basically had to avoid any kind of like social interaction. Basically, after my 1 week of treatment, I just had to be in my room at home, because if I leave, there's a big chance like if I get sick and I don't have enough white blood count, like white blood cells to fight back, then the infection could potentially kill me. And then even if that wasn't the case, with my red blood cells kind of depleted, I felt lightheaded every time I would try to get up um, from bed. Like it was just hard to move around. I just felt like I didn't have any energy at all. So that was also a really big issue. Um, and yeah, for that was most of the side effects that I experienced. Around the sixth session, I believe, fifth or sixth session, that's when I said like, okay, I don't think we can increase the dosage. Like this is too much. I don't think I can, like go through another one of like this increased dosage. So can we please lower it down? And we did. So from then on, like my dose just I think stabilized. Um, from then until the last session, which I think was session 7. But yeah, throughout that whole thing, even though like I didn't have too much of an appetite, my parents, like my dad especially, would always be buying me food, making sure that I eat, because his mentality I think was it's better to like eat even if you don't feel like it, just so your body has energy, rather than like yeah you don't feel like it, so like don't eat. Um, but yeah, there's like I'm just so fortunate to have my family around the whole time. Like they provide a really good support network. Once December hit, it was kind of sad because my siblings they were very young, and at that time like I don't think they were too kind of like informed about what was going on. They just thought that I was sick. But before December, they would visit me often, and we would play board games or like whatever games were available, since I was still in the pediatric ward of the hospital. But once December hit and it was like flu season, then they stopped letting visitors in. So that kind of like that really sucked, because basically only one of my parents could come in at a time. My siblings couldn't visit me. My grandparents couldn't visit me. So it was just like really tough and lonely in the hospital. But yeah, I mean, during my time there, just seeing the other patients there, the other pediatric oncology patients, like they were younger, they were smaller, and they were just like tackling through their chemo like with optimism, and they always seemed so like bright and cheery, and it was just crazy to see. Like I was there, kind of like sulking, like being sad, but at the same time like they're going through something that I'm going through, and potentially worse. And like they have smiles on their faces, they love like visiting the playroom, so that really inspired me, made me want to visit the playroom a lot more. um, but yeah, like it's just puts everything into perspective, seeing other people going through like such a challenge, and how and seeing how they're like facing it. That just really opened up my eyes. But yeah, with that said, like that's all I wanted to talk about for today. I mentioned the medication that I had to go through, kind of like my routine for the chemotherapy and my treatment in general, and then the side effects that I felt. Um, and with that said, just like what I mentioned in my previous video, if you're going through something like this or you know somebody that is, it's just very important to have a good support network, because while you may not be able to control what's going on around you, you can be in control of your internal conditions, specifically your mental health, and that's just like half of the battle. So it's also very, very important. So with that said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys on part 3, where I will be talking about basically my life after chemotherapy. It'll just focus on like directly what's after chemotherapy, not like 5 years out, which is right now. um, but yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.